What's up, Vault Dwellers? Dan here, and you know, I'm not gonna lie to you. This one, it hits me really hard. Chuck Norris, he left us on March 19th, 2026. And if you grew up in an era of VHS rental stores and Saturday afternoon action marathons, you just felt something leave this world that can never be replaced.
Did you do that to me, Texas Ranger?
Now, they say death once had a near Chuck Norris experience. Well, death finally got brave enough to try again. This man was a 6-time undefeated world karate champion, the United States Air Force veteran, and a guy who turned wooden acting into an art form that somehow made you love him even more. He wasn't trying to be De Niro. He was trying to roundhouse kick evil in the face. And brother, did he ever succeed. So today, we're going to count down 13 Chuck Norris movies that made this man a legend. Some were great, some were terrible, but all of them were absolutely, unmistakably Chuck. All right, let's do this.
Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris, man of action. Chuck Norris stars in Chuck Norris Karate Commandos.
Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
All right, we're going to get started at the deep end of the Chuck Norris filmography with Slaughter in San Francisco back from 1974. And this is a movie that has more alternate titles than it had good ideas. This was also known as Yellow-Faced Tiger and also known as Karate Cop. Also known as, wait, is that Chuck Norris playing the bad guy? Yeah, it sure is. Chuck plays a drug kingpin named Chuck Slaughter.
Now I'll just stand by and watch and see what you can do about it. Get him!
He's blonde. He's dubbed with someone else's voice. I mean, the star of the movie was Don Wong, right? He was a cop avenging his murdered partner, but nobody rented this off the shelf in 1981 for Don Wong. They rented this because Chuck's name was suddenly worth money. Golden Harvest shot this right after Way of the Dragon, but it sat on the shelf for like 7 years until Chuck became famous enough to slap his face on the cover. I mean, the movie's rough, it's super cheap, and watching Chuck get beaten up by the hero at the end, it feels like cosmically wrong, right? They say Chuck Norris, he doesn't even read books. He just stares them down until he gets the information he wants.
You call that a hit? That's a hit.
Hellbound from 1994 answers a question I'm sure everybody was asking. What if Chuck Norris fought Satan's personal assistant? Well, Chuck plays Chicago detective Frank Shatter.
Yeah? Watch this, you little piece of shit.
Chuck, don't shoot him, man. Don't shoot him. Please. Okay.
Also a name so aggressively cop-like, it sounds like it was generated by an action movie name randomizer. He and his partner Calvin Jackson, they get sent to Israel to investigate a murdered rabbi, but somehow they end up battling Prosantanos. This is an ancient demon freed from his tomb by the world's unluckiest grave robbers.
You boys want to try it again?
This was the last film ever produced by Cannon Films. And honestly, you can feel the lights flickering on the way out. Director Aaron Norris, who's Chuck's brother, goes all in on the supernatural angle, but forgets to include enough actual fighting. Christopher Neen hams it up magnificently as the villain.
I prepare to anoint my spirit with this royal blood.
But the final showdown, where Chuck roundhouse kicks a demon, is somehow both exactly what you want and a little bit deeply disappointing. Now, they say when the boogeyman goes to sleep every night, he checks his closet for Chuck Norris. The movie, okay, it's terrible, but the premise alone earns it a spot on this list.
Where force is necessary, there it shall be applied boldly, decisively, and completely.
You're right about that, Judge.
Breaker Breaker from 1977 is where it all started for Chuck as the leading man. And folks, it is gloriously rough around every edge. Chuck plays JD, and he's a truck driver and a karate expert, which is already the most 1970s character description probably ever written. His kid brother goes missing in a corrupt little town called Texas City, which is ironically located in California. And it's run by a crooked judge who makes Boss Hogg look like a pillar of judicial integrity.
He comes back into my town again, you kill him.
This was shot in just like 11 days on the old Paramount Ranch, and this thing looks like it cost about $40 and a handshake. Chuck, he's still blonde, still clean shaven, and you can see him trying to figure out this whole acting thing in real time. But here's what matters. This thing made money, like $12 million on a no-string budget. Chuck himself, he wasn't particularly proud of this film, but his father called it his favorite of Chuck's movies. And sometimes your dad's approval, it means more than an Oscar. The climax, where a convoy of truckers literally flattens the entire town, it's the kind of beautiful insanity that makes B-movies worth living for. They say that Chuck Norris once kicked a coal mine and turned it into a diamond mine. In Breaker Breaker, he kicked an entire town and turned it into a parking lot.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for helping me out again.
Sidekicks from 1992 is what happens when Chuck Norris makes a movie where he plays the greatest version of himself as imagined by a 12-year-old boy. Jonathan Brandis, he stars as Barry, and he's an asthmatic kid who gets bullied at school and escapes into daydreams where he fights alongside his hero, Chuck Norris.
That was for nothing.
Reenacting scenes from Delta Force and Missing in Action, it's basically the Karate Kid if Mr. Miyagi was replaced by a very stoic Texan who could slam a revolving door. Mako steals the whole film as Mr. Lee, the wise martial arts teacher.
Always expect the unexpected.
Okay.
And Joe Piscopo, he shows up as this villain who is so cartoonishly over the top that he seems to be acting in a completely different movie.
I wanted to see how good you really are. You're only going to see it once, Stone.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just shamelessly a Chuck Norris vanity project, directed by his brother Aaron and financed by a Houston furniture store owner. But here's the thing. Underneath all the cheese, there's this incredible sweetness to the film. Kids in the 90s, when they rented this, it totally made them want to sign up for karate classes. This made them believe that a hero might show up when you need him the most. And when Chuck Norris appears at the tournament at the end, you can kind of believe it too. You know, they say Chuck Norris, he uses a stunt double only for crying scenes. Firewalker from 1986 is Chuck Norris's attempt to make an Indiana Jones movie, and it's exactly as chaotic as that sounds. Chuck and Louis Gossett Jr., they play Max and Leo, and they're a pair of down-on-their-luck treasure hunters who team up with Melody Anderson and her ancient map to find Aztec gold in Central America. John Rhys Davis shows up because apparently it's a legal requirement for any 80s movie adventure film. And Will Sampson gives one of his final performances as a wise Apache elder.
What happened to the Firewalker?
Legend says he flew to the sun, there to walk among the fire forever. This is the story of the Firewalker. It's all I know.
This was Chuck trying to do like comedy for the very first time, and opinions are violently divided on this film.
May, this is all A, you're alt Fay, you stupid A up J. Amen.
Amen.
Some people, they think the banter between Chuck and Gossett is just comedic gold, right? Others think it's a war crime against cinema. I think I fall somewhere in the middle. Chuck and Lou, I mean, they clearly enjoy each other's company. And fun fact here, their stars are literally back to back on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. They say that Chuck Norris can light a fire by rubbing 2 ice cubes together. And you know what? After watching Firewalker, totally believe it, because this man can somehow generate entertainment from a script that gives him absolutely nothing to work with. The fight choreography takes a back seat to wisecracks and jungle mishaps. But as a goofy Saturday afternoon time killer, Firewalker has a dopey charm that's just hard to completely hate.
Come on, let's see how tough you are.
An Eye for an Eye from 1981 is Chuck Norris in full revenge mode. And truthfully, that's when the man was at his most watchable.
Nothing I could do. They used me. I was just a bait. They were on to you. They knew all about you.
Who are they, Tony?
I can't tell you. You know that. I can't.
Chuck plays Sean Kane, and he's a San Francisco cop who goes rogue after his partner is murdered during an investigation into a drug ring. Christopher Lee, you know, Dracula himself, shows up as the villain, which immediately elevates this thing like 3 notches above where it has any right to be.
The car. It was you in the car.
I'd like to stay and discuss this with you, Mr. Kane, but you understand.
Hey, Tyler!
Director Steve Carver knew how to shoot action, and the fight scenes, I mean, they have this snap to them that Chuck's earlier films were kind of missing. There's this terrific martial arts showdown in a flour mill that has absolutely amazing choreography. And Professor Toru Tanaka, he shows up as an enforcer who looks like, I mean, he could bench press Chuck's entire filmography. The plot is nothing you haven't seen before, but this was the period where Chuck was sharpening his screen persona. He was just figuring out that less dialogue and more kicking was the winning formula. You know they say if you want a list of Chuck Norris's enemies, just check the extinct species list. Hey, I know I missed a ton of Chuck Norris movies and TV appearances. And you know what? Chuck Norris has some of the most amazing facts in the world, and I'm kind of curious which ones are your favorites. Drop them in the comments, Vault Dwellers, because we need to give this man the send-off he deserves. A Force of One from 1979 followed the surprise success of Good Guys Wear Black, and it gave us a template that Chuck, he would refine for like the next decade. In this, he plays Matt Logan, who's a martial arts champion who helps a team of undercover narcotics agents after their people start getting picked off by this mysterious karate-killing assassin. Bill Superfoot Wallace, he's a real-life kickboxing champion, and he plays the heavy in this film. And their climactic showdown has a crunch to it that only happens when two guys who actually know how to fight square off on camera. Jennifer O'Neill brings real acting chops as the lead detective, but the pacing, it drags in the middle when it gets like too bogged down in police procedural stuff. Chuck, he designed the fight sequences himself, and when they let him loose, this thing just sings. The film also has a surprisingly emotional subplot about Chuck's relationship with an adopted son that hints at the softer side he'd later bring out in Walker, Texas Ranger. They say that Chuck Norris was once in a middle school English class where the teacher assigned an essay on courage, and he got an A+ for turning in a blank page with only his name at the top. Good Guys Wear Black from 1978 is the one that basically changed everything for Chuck Norris. This is the film where he went from the guy that Bruce Lee fought to a legitimate box office draw. He plays Major John T. Booker, and he's a Vietnam vet turned college professor whose former squad mates are being systematically murdered.
Who the hell are you?
That's the lady, mate.
This movie stars Ann Archer as the love interest.
For personal reasons. You believe me now?
James Franciscus as the slimy diplomat.
Major Booker to the shores of Tripoli, and it was expedient, goddammit, to get rid of the Black Tigers. The end still justifies the means.
And the great Dana Andrews, who brings gravitas to the old-timer role. This has the best supporting cast of any Chuck film. Director Ted Post, who helmed Dirty Harry's sequel, Magnum Force, he brings the same 70s throw of grit to the proceedings. Yeah, Chuck, he talks too much in this one, right? Steve McQueen himself told Chuck to let the character actors handle the exposition and save his words for when they matter. But the action, it totally delivers. Especially the legendary flying kick through a car windshield that became the movie's iconic moment. Chuck peddled this script like all over Hollywood, convincing one producer by saying there were 4 million karate practitioners in America who all knew his name. He was right. It made like $18 million. You know, they say if you spell Chuck Norris in Scrabble, you win forever. After Good Guys Wear Black, Chuck spelled his name across every marquee in America, and he never stopped winning.
Damn idiot! You stop this car, you hear me? You stop this car, I'll kill you!
You're panicking, Morgan.
Stop the goddamn car!
Invasion USA from 1985 is like 100 minutes of just pure, unfiltered, weapons-grade Canon Films insanity. And I loved like every stupid second of it. Chuck plays a retired CIA agent named Matt Hunter, and he's a man who lives in the Florida Everglades, drives an airboat, and wrestles alligators. When terrorists led by Richard Lynch launch a full-scale assault on American soil, blowing up like suburban neighborhoods on Christmas Eve, and attacking shopping malls, only one man in very tight jeans can stop them. Chuck, he co-wrote the script. And you can tell because his character essentially has like psychic powers showing up in every single terrorist attack seconds before it happens. He drives his pickup truck through a mall. He dual wields mini Uzis like they're water pistols. Richard Lynch, he brings like this menace as Rostov, and Billy Drago oozes sleaze in the supporting role. Roger Ebert called it brain damaged, and you know, I mean, he wasn't wrong, but he wasn't the target audience here. They say Chuck Norris didn't need a GPS because wherever he goes becomes the destination. This is the movie where Chuck Norris stopped being an actor and became a force of nature. And you know what? If you're enjoying this tribute, you need to go hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a countdown. You know they say Chuck Norris, he doesn't subscribe to channels. Channels subscribe to Chuck Norris. But you know what? You're not Chuck Norris. So why don't you go hit that button?
To lose this?
The Delta Force from 1986 is just peak Canon Films ambition. Take the 1985 TWA hijacking, add a little Chuck Norris and a rocket launcher equipped motorcycle, and then stir vigorously. Chuck and the legendary Lee Marvin in his final film role, they lead an elite military unit tasked with rescuing hostages from terrorists. The first half plays like a surprisingly tense hostage thriller with real dramatic weight. But then Chuck gets on that motorcycle and the movie transforms into a completely different film where things simply explode for 40 straight minutes. This is directed by Canon's co-founder, and it had twice the budget of a typical Norse film, and you can just totally feel it in the bass. Lee Marvin brings a weary dignity that the film just desperately needs, and Robert Forster is excellent as the lead hijacker. Is it wildly entertaining when Chuck rides the motorcycle down the runway firing rockets at terrorists? You can bet your beard it is. They say Chuck Norris once had an arm wrestling contest with Superman, and the loser had to wear his underwear on the outside for the rest of his life. This was one of Chuck's biggest box office hits and cemented his status as America's one-man army. Code of Silence from 1985 is, and I would gladly fight anyone who disagrees, one of the best pure Chuck Norris films ever made. Director Andrew Davis, who would later make The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, he brings a level of craft and storytelling sophistication that Chuck had never experienced before. Norris plays Eddie Cusack. He's a Chicago cop, caught between a gang war and a corrupt cop cover-up in his own department. And Henry Silva, he's just magnificent as the mob boss.
When the sun comes up, you give me Luna. When the girl dies, slowly.
And the whole production has this gritty, authentic Chicago feel and puts it miles ahead of typical action fare. The elevated train sequence, super thrilling. And the moral complexity of Chuck's character, a man willing to stand alone against his brothers in blue, gives him something real to play here. Vincent Canby of the New York Times wrote that this could be his breakout picture. And for once, the critics, they were actually on Chuck's side. There's even like this proto-RoboCop police robot that shows up in the finale, which is just delightfully bonkers. They say that Chuck Norris once took a lie detector test and the machine confessed everything. This is the one I always recommend to people who think Chuck Norris couldn't act. Lone Wolf McQuade from 1983 is Chuck Norris's masterpiece of attitude, the movie that transformed him from a blonde California karate guy into the bearded, truck-driving, lone wolf Texas legend we all remember. He plays J.J. McQuade, a renegade Texas Ranger who eats alone, fights alone, and even has a pet wolf. David Carradine plays the villain, and he's an arms dealer and a martial arts expert. And watching these two circle each other for like 90 minutes is action movie heaven. Director Steve Carver shoots this like a modern spaghetti western, complete with a stunning silhouette shot of McQuade walking into frame against the sunset that belongs in a John Ford film. Barbara Carrera is just so gorgeous as the love interest. And that climactic fight between Chuck and Carradine is just legendary. When asked about Carradine's martial arts ability, Chuck diplomatically said David Carradine was every bit as good a martial artist as Chuck was as an actor. Oh, and Roger Ebert gave this 3.5 stars and said the character deserved a franchise. Well, for once, Roger was right. And a decade later, he became Walker, Texas Ranger. You know they say Chuck Norris has a polar bear rug at home, but it's not dead. It's just too afraid to move. And at number 1, we go all the way back to where the legend was born. The Way of the Dragon from 1972, which was also released in America as Return of the Dragon. It features the single most important moment in Chuck Norris's entire career. 10 minutes inside the Roman Colosseum opposite Bruce Lee in what many consider the greatest martial arts fight ever put on film. Bruce Lee, he wrote this, he directed it, and he did the choreography for it. And Bruce, he chose Chuck Norris because he was the only fighter fast enough to keep up with him. When Chuck asked Bruce if he wanted to fight the U.S. karate champion, Bruce replied, "No, I want to kill the champion." They filmed the Colosseum scenes illegally, by the way. They snuck cameras in by pretending to be tourists. They bribed officials. Lee spent like 45 hours doing the choreography for this fight. There was even a stray cat that was watching the whole thing, and Lee kept it in the film because he was a genius who understood that even animals, they couldn't look away from these two. Chuck, he does lose the fight in the movie and he dies, but it was this role that made every producer in Hollywood take notice. Steve McQueen saw it and told Chuck, "You need to take acting seriously." And the rest, it's history. Decades of roundhouse kicks, Texas Rangers, and internet facts that made him immortal. They say that when Chuck Norris does push-ups, he doesn't push himself up, he pushes the earth down. Now that's not a joke, that's a fact. Chuck Norris wasn't just an action star. He was a martial arts pioneer, a military veteran, and a man who turned limited acting range into unlimited screen charisma through sheer force of will and approximately 10,000 roundhouse kicks. He made movies that were often ridiculous, sometimes terrible, and always unmistakably his. He kicked evil in the teeth and never apologized for keeping things simple. Good guys win, bad guys lose. And somewhere in the middle, Chuck Norris shows up in tight jeans and just handles business. You know they say go sit around campfires and tell Chuck Norris stories. Well, Vault Dwellers, that's exactly what we just did. We sat around the campfire and told some Chuck Norris stories that wouldn't have it any other way.
Please.
Rest in power, Chuck. The Colosseum misses you. The earth misses your push-ups. And keep it weird, folks.
Facts like Chuck Norris once challenged Lance Armstrong in a Who Has More Testicles contest. Chuck Kahunas, baby. Chuck Norris won by 5.
There are no steroids in baseball, only players Chuck Norris has breathed on.